All right, good to go.
Okay, cool. So our tree group PowerPoint, how to read like a writer. So the purpose of the article is to inform and engage the audience, reading like a writer, and explain the relevance and importance and effectiveness. You are reading to learn about writing. The audience is towards college students. For most college students, RLW is a new way to read, and it can be, oh no, I can't see it, learn at first. Making things even more difficult is that your college writing instructor may expect you to read this way for class, but never actually know how to do it. That's what this essay is for.
And so I guess just like the outline of the whole essay. So it starts off with his intro, and he kind of explains where he works and like the relevance to what he's talking about. And he says he works at a theater, and this was important because he's trying to read while he's hearing plays in the background. So he had to be very conscious of like each word and sentence that he was reading, which made him think more and more that that's how writing is done, word by word. And he introduces himself as also a college student, which is relevant to the audience, which is college students. And then it goes on to him explaining what reading like a writer is, and he defines it. And it's just basically reading a piece of writing as a whole and looking at it in its structure and its entirety versus its content, so you can take the tools that was used in that writing in your own writing. And then he goes on to how it's different from normal reading, and he uses a carpenter analogy, which is, he basically was saying, if you look at a way like a carpenter looks at a house, or like an architect, he doesn't look at the house and be like, oh, it's like a really cool, like decorated house. He looks at it in terms of its structure, like what beams support what walls and stuff like that. And that's how he wants us to look at writing and reading. And then he goes on to his essential question of why it's important to read like a writer. And it's basically, again, to just improve our own writing and to be able to connect with the audience in a effective way. And then he goes on to discuss the components of reading like a writer, which is just asking questions before, during, and after you're reading. You know, what is the purpose? Who's the audience? What is this genre? Is it a student written or a published text? And he talks about marking up and annotating while you're reading in order to just help you go back and remember certain writing techniques that you can pull out from that text and use in your own writing. And he ends with going back to his first introductory paragraph and analyzes that. And I think this was effective, and he did this with the purpose to show that like reading like a writer can be used for any text, not just like a big like essay that you have to do, or like a certain genre of text. That can be used with anything, and that's why he did it with his own essay. And yeah.
Okay. So for the organization, he basically did it in order of how you would read like a writer. So it goes from like why we're doing it, why we're learning, what questions you need to ask yourself, and what you should be writing while reading it. So basically analyzing it, and it just keeps going in order. He did this to flow the ideas of the article in a way which goes into the steps of concept itself, which is how to read like a writer. He uses language such as analyzing to describe what you should do while reading, and the tone he uses implies that he actually does know what he's talking about, and that how it's important to the subject itself. But overall, the structure helped us to understand how to read like a writer, which is what the entire paper is about.
And so, yeah, that's pretty much like the same thing, like what you just said. So, like the unity and the coherence. So, like each paragraph or like section, like tied in with the one before it and with the one after it, which is like really helpful in like the unity of the whole essay. And then because of this, the whole essay was very coherent in terms of like his ideas. So, like he didn't just all of a sudden just throw out a definition of what reading like a writer was and then like how to do it. He started off with like his introduction of how he got there, then what it meant, and then what aspects go into that, why it's important, and like stuff like that. And that just helped with the whole flow of the essay.
Okay, so for the rhetorical appeals, he uses pathos when he describes like what it means to be like a writer. So he kind of did it in a way where he shows how through reading like wow. Okay. He shows how through writing it can make the reader feel. So he says, "What is it about the way this text is written that makes you feel and respond to the way you do?" So this he's kind of showing how you can get the reader to feel and respond to what you're saying. And then logos is shown through a long list of choices, but is presented with a reasonable approach. So like for his thing, it was like you can make a list. What are the advantages, disadvantages, starting of the quote? What about the advantages and disadvantages of starting the quote with the president? So with that one, he was kind of just saying, well, with starting, he gave a list of different ways that the saying if we started with the president's quote or saying I have a quote about the president, basically whichever way is gonna be the best way to approach it. And then ethos is shown by using many authors agreeing on the same topic. So he was saying like author David makes similar comparisons when he's writing. So his quote was, "Reading won't help you much unless you learn how to read like a writer." And then these choices show how many authors are doing the same thing and how you could even better your own writing. This shows how the field communications knowledge by showing what has been most effective for all of these writers. It shows tips on how you can achieve your goal. The goal, as you read like a writer, is to locate what you believe is the most important writerly choices represented in the text.
And so, yeah, so the evidence, this kind of just piggybacks off of what Mackenzie said on how, like, the field communicates, right, their knowledge. And so all of the evidence was either from an author, a professor, an English professor, a poet, a famous critic, former students, scholars. And this is all very important because this is, like, the evidence he needs in order to appeal to ethos and logos. Like, for example, when he was giving the carpenter or the architect analogy, it would have been pointless for him to like interview an architect and be like, how do you like make a building? Instead, he like used a professor and like a author and talked about how they construct books and stuff. And so he where was I going with this? Oh yeah, so the famous poet he cited. I think it's important to note that he was a poet from the 1940s, so that way it shows that this style of reading like a writer isn't something that's like brand new. It's something that has always kind of been around and is molded and formed and advanced to like now. So like there's that like juxtaposition of like old ways of doing things and new ways of doing things, and this kind of like still molds those two together. And yeah, I don't know if there's anything else you guys want to add or anything. So I think that was our last slide.
Yeah, it is. I think that was pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll stop here.